Hi, today let us look at this very interesting topic, Jainism and Buddhism. So let us start by looking at the causes that led to the rise of Jainism and Buddhism. If we have a look at the doodling done by my ex-student Hitansh, you will get a clear idea as to what were the reasons that these two new religious orders came into being. First thing was reaction against ritualism. There were ceremonies and religion had become very, very expensive. People could not afford it, and the Brahmins had become very, very powerful. Religion had turned into a money-making business. People wanted religion that was simple, that was inexpensive. There was a lot of corruption in religion. The priests encouraged the ordinary people to perform yajnas, conduct household rituals, and they were finding it very, very difficult. They wanted religion that was pure, that was divine. Then the rigid caste system. There was a clash of power between the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins, especially the kings and the Brahmins. Then the Shudras were disrespected and they were asked to perform the menial jobs. Now the Shudras wanted to be respected. They wanted equality. They wanted a religion that would treat all equally and work on the spirit of universal brotherhood. Next one was difficult language. Now most of the Vedic literature was composed in Sanskrit, which many people could not understand. All the prayers that the Brahmins performed, prayed, was in Sanskrit. People could not connect with that. People wanted religion where they could understand, they could interpret what was going on, and they wanted a change. The political situation was such where the kings did not like the interference of the Brahmins over and over again because it kept affecting their power, position, authority. Although the kings were not happy with certain things done by the Brahmins, their hands were tied up. So they wanted to look out for an opportunity, and when they saw Jainism and Buddhism being formed, they were ready to give wholehearted support and patronage. And finally, the agricultural economy. So we saw in the later Vedic age, agriculture was the main occupation, where they had started using animal-drawn plows, and they wanted religion that pushed aside any kind of animal sacrifices, that called for protection of animals. And that is why you have the birth for a new religious ideology. You have the reasons for the birth of Jainism and Buddhism. I want you all to take a new sheet of paper. Please write down the name of the chapter, Jainism and Buddhism. Then write down activity doodling. In the center or wherever you want, write down causes for the rise of Jainism and Buddhism. Take 5 minutes, not more, to complete this doodling activity. You can take inspiration from what Hitansh has shown us, or you can add in your own creativity. Once you are done documenting this, you can move ahead. Let us look at the different sources throwing light on the different aspects of Jainism and Buddhism. So the first source is Angas. Now Jain scriptures are popularly known as Agams, and in the Agams there are Angas. Now what are Angas? Whatever Lord Mahavir taught after gaining omniscience, it was put together, it was compiled by his disciples in 12 parts or Angas. Now all these 12 Angas are collectively known as Dvada Shangi. Out of all the 12, two important ones that we will be talking about. One is the Acharang Sutra, that has the code of conduct which a Jain monk has to follow. And the second is Bhagavati Sutra. It is a well-known Anga and it contains the Jain doctrines in a comprehensive manner. Now what else is discussed in all these different Angas? It discusses about the religious rites and rituals, the stages of a householder's life, vows of chastity, rules of conduct, and Jain philosophy. Based on these different Angas, the saints later compiled 12 small auxiliary works called as Upangas. So this source that we looked at right now, the Angas, talks more about Jainism. The next source throwing light on Buddhism is the Jataka tales, or as some pronounce, the Jatak tales. I am sure when you were young you have read loads and loads of these Jataka tales. Now why is this as a source talking about Buddhism? Because in these tales it talks about the previous births of Lord Buddha in both the human and animal form, where Lord Buddha shows us some virtue. When we read these stories, we can gain knowledge, learn something about morality, humanity, selfless attitude, and truth. Now, all these stories have been illustrated in different sculptures, paintings throughout the Buddhist world. Now, although these Jataks or these Jatakas describe the previous births and lives of Lord Buddha, but very little biographic material about Lord Buddha's own life has been recorded. But these stories throw a lot of light on the political, socio-economic conditions of people from the 5th to 2nd century before Christ. They also reflect the Buddhist morals, ethics, and principles, and therefore it is a very valuable source telling us more about Buddhism. The next source throwing light on Buddhism is the Tripitakas or the Tripitakas. Now what are these Tripitakas? They are the most important literary work of the Buddhists. It is also called as 3 baskets of Buddhist canon or teachings written in Pali. Now at that point in time they wrote all the instructions, all the details on long narrow leaves, kind of stitched it on one side and bound all those bunches together and then stored it in the baskets, thus known as the 3 baskets. Now before you ask me, are these the original baskets? These baskets right now are just used for representational purpose. So let us see what was there in each of these baskets. The first one was the Vinaya Pitaka. Now this is called as the discipline basket because it talks of the rules, regulations for the monks and the nuns. It also contains the life and teachings of Lord Buddha, ancient history, customs, art at that point in time. The next Pitaka is the lecture basket. This Pitaka contains religious lectures of Lord Buddha, lectures even by some of Lord Buddha's disciples like Ananda, Sariputta. Dhammapada is also an important component, an important part of this Pitaka. And it also contains teachings of Lord Buddha out here. And the third Pitaka is the Abhidhamma Pitaka, the basket where there is philosophical knowledge put inside. Now it describes the work of the human mind, state of matter. So all these are the 3 important baskets. Now how will we remember what is there in each basket? When I am talking about Vinaya Pitaka, it has the word win. Now when can you win a game? When can you win in life? When there are rules, when you are disciplined. Okay. Sutta Pitaka. Chance mila nahi ki elders start giving you lecture and lecture. Alright. So Sutta. Alright. So it's all free. And then finally Abhidhamma Pitaka. So I'm just going to help you remember. So dham karke, if you bang the desk, I'm going to start off my philosophical bakwas and say that you know what, you shouldn't bang the desk and even non-living things have life and blah blah blee blue. So you have Abhidhamma Pitaka, the philosophical basket. So all these are the 3 important baskets throwing light on Buddhism. Let us zoom in on aspects related to Jainism. Now for some this is very close to your heart because you belong to this religious ideology, this religious group, but we will be looking at elements from the exam point of view. Now, when we look at Jainism, the doctrines of Jainism was preached by the saints, the acharyas called as the Tirthankars. Now, out of the 24 Tirthankars, you need to remember 3 important names. The first Tirthankar, Lord Rishabdev, the 23rd Tirthankar, Lord Parshvanath, and the 24th Tirthankar, Lord Mahavir. Now, when I ask you who was the founder of Jainism, you are going to tell me, Vabis, it was Lord Rishabdev. But there are a few who also believe that Lord Mahavir was the founder of Jainism. Now, why do they consider Lord Mahavir as the founder? Is because Lord Mahavir took Jainism to great heights. He made it extremely popular. He made it very, very systematic, and therefore he is also considered as a key founder of Jainism. Now, he was born in Kundagram near Vaishali in Bihar. Lord Mahavir was known by different names. Let us look at the names. Now, when you write the names, please give me the English equivalent and the details supporting each name. So the first name that he was known by was Vardhaman or prosperous. Why was that so? Because when he was born, his father, King Siddharth's reign was very, very prosperous. Later on, he was given the name Mahavir or courageous, because he had saved the lives of his friends when they were in danger. He was later called as Jinnah or the conqueror, because after 12 years of severe penance at the age of 30, he finally obtained supreme knowledge, conquered all the worldly desires, and finally he was called as Kevalin or the all-knowing, because he knew everything, the past, the present, and the future. Let us look at some important teachings of Jainism and how did Lord Mahavir contribute to the society. So the first teaching was the 5 vows. Now there is something called as Mahavrats or the 5 Mahavows which the Jain monks have to follow. And there are anuvrats that the householders, the common people have to follow. So what are these 5 vows? The first one is, if we look at the doodling done by my ex-student Yuti, you will get a clear picture of the 5 vows. So the first vow is, no hitting at all. Control your anger. So ahimsa, non-violence. The second is satya, always tell the truth. Asteya, no stealing at all. Doesn't mean that you have to be a bank robber. Stealing can be in any form. Taking something without somebody's knowledge, without somebody's permission is also equivalent to stealing. Aparigraha is non-possession. You mustn't hoard things, you mustn't possess things, and just stay away from the materialistic wants and desires. And finally is brahmacharya or chastity. So all these are the 5 vows. Now Lord Mahavir said that when we are looking at violence, he said there are 3 types of violence: physical, verbal, mental violence, and one must try to stay away from all these 3 types of violence. Now just a little vernacular here and there to help you understand these 3 types of violence. One is the physical violence, where you have the people in the category Attamazi Satakli, angry young people, angry at all point in time to hit, bash, smash, todi nakhas, fodi nakhas, bhukko kari nakhas type people. Alright? There are some people who work with mental violence. That means they will smile and say a big hi. Alright? So if I'm walking in the corridor, somebody is going to say, hi Babis, good morning. And in the mind, what will be going on will be something like this. तारा पर कुर्सी परी जाए, तारा पर टेबल परी जाए, चलता चलता हाय हाय, तू जोर थी सरी जाए. Oh my God, what a cruel, wicked thing going on. Yeah, so outwardly the person is greeting me, but in the mind they are praying, hoping that a table falls on me, a chair falls on me, I fall down, I slip down when I'm walking. Oh, that's called as mental violence, and I'm sure many of you would have tried that at different points in time. Then we are looking at the third type of violence, that is the verbal violence. Words can hurt people. Okay, so to give you an example, if I ask one of you and ask you, can you tell me how do you find my lectures, how are the sessions, how are you feeling sitting in my class, I'm all excited to hear positive things, and there the person starts, eyes open or ya ho shut, lecture boring hota hai, बातें होती रहती है पर यहाँ कुछ नहीं घुसता है, तुरु तुरुरुरुरुरुरुरु तुरुरुरुरु, हे तुरुरुरुरुरुरु तुरुरुरुरु, हे. Oh my God, when I'm going to hear that, it's going to hurt me terribly and I'm going to start crying. Alright, so 3 types of violence Lord Mahavir has said. Please don't hurt people with your actions, your words or your thoughts. Everything should be extremely pure. The next teaching is the Navatattva or the 9 truths. Now, they believe that the Navatattvas or the 9 truths are essential, and renunciation is the shortest way to salvation. So the knowledge of these 9 truths is essential, and when you give up everything, when you renounce everything, it is the shortest way that will help you attain moksha. Now, what are these 9 truths having a central place in the philosophy of Jainism? They are Jiva, living things; Ajiva, non-living things; Punya, results of good deeds; Paap, that is the different sins; Ashrav, good deeds; Sanvar, hindrances in the way of karma; Bandha, that is bondage; Nirjara, destruction of karmas; and finally moksha or salvation. Now I'm going to teach you an easy way to remember these 9 truths. You need to know them in the particular order, especially the last one is very important, and that is moksha or salvation. So using a little vernacular to help you out, you are a jiva, that is you are a living thing. You are sitting on a jiva, you are sitting on a non-living chair. Yeah. Now when I am walking and if I kick a book or a bag that's placed, my God, you are going to say, Vabis, paap lag jayega, Ram Ram, Shiv Shiv kar do. Alright, that's so bad. Be careful when you walk. And the moment I bend down and say, sorry, I didn't realize it was an absolute error. Okay, you're going to forgive me. Yeah. And I'm going to try to do some punya, good deeds, so that my paap will be washed away. Okay. Now I have to run and reach the finish line, but ashu, I am sneezing, okay? Ashrav, I have to run, okay? I am sneezing, ashrav, okay? Sanvar मैंने पहना है, salwar, sanvar. Now that is going to come in the way of me running and reaching the finish line. So मैं अपने salwar को sanvar ko bandh dungi. So the next one is bandha. Then I'm going to say, hey, excuse me, so and so, jara, a little move here, move there. Okay. So Neeraj is our imaginary student. We are going to say Neeraj jara, excuse me, Nir jara. Yeah. And finally, I'm going to reach the finish line, which is moksha. Alright. So you have these 9 truths or Navatattvas, which are having a central place in Jainism. When I asked my students to represent the 9 truths, one of my students, Sneha, beautifully expressed herself by turning each of the 9 truths, each of the 9 tattvas into an important milestone on the path, the road to achieving the final goal, reaching the final destination, the final milestone, the final benchmark of moksha. What were the other teachings of Lord Mahavir? he spoke about the three Ratnas. He said that the ultimate goal of man is to attain freedom from the worldly bonds, that is to attain moksha, which can be obtained by following the three Ratnas or the three jewels. Which are the three jewels? The first one is right faith in the 24 Tirthankars and the knowledge shared by them, right knowledge of the 9 truths or the Navtattvas, and finally right conduct by following the 5 vows. He said that these three jewels will guide the people across to acquire knowledge and attain moksha or salvation. Next, he believed in karma, and he said that one should be responsible for one's own karma, one's own actions, and only good deeds, good karmas can free a man from the cycle of birth and death. He also spoke about equality, and he said that there should be equality between men, women, universal brotherhood. He considered all people, irrespective of their caste, creed, as equal. He said that only good deeds can ultimately help a person achieve salvation. He also spoke about the eternal soul, where he said that the Atma, the soul, is immortal. He said that the body dies, but not the soul. He also taught about the penance, that is strict self-imposed punishment, and he said that only when one is strictly under discipline and one has severe punishments, leads an austere, a very strict life, can he achieve the final aim of moksha. And he said that moksha or the salvation will free the people from births, deaths, the cycle of birth and rebirth, and this can be achieved by leading an austere life, that is a strict life based on non-violence, based on complete self-discipline. And he said that one must practice the three Ratnas, that is the right faith in the 24 Tirthankaras and the knowledge shared by them, right knowledge of the 9 truths, and right conduct by following the 5 vows will help one attain salvation. It's time for some brainstorming. Let us pause and look at 3 important elements that can be asked as an application based question, and you should be ready to respond. The first thing is, what were the reasons for Jainism becoming popular? That is, what were the causes for the spread of Jainism? Now let's quickly revise. Jainism was taught in the local dialect Prakrit instead of Sanskrit, so people found it easier to follow the teachings of Jainism. Then there was a lot of royal patronage that was received. The kings were ready to give monetary support. There were saints and monks who preached. There were monasteries that were set up. And the most important thing is it appealed to the people. Why? Because it was based on spirituality. There were no animal sacrifices, no caste class distinctions. There was universal brotherhood, equality, and that is why Jainism spread and became popular. If we look at the impact that Jainism left on the society, it had a profound, a deep impact on the political, social life of the people. If we look at the political impact, the kings lost their warlike instincts, and that was one of the reasons why many Jain kings tried not to expand their political empire further. The socio-religious impact was the caste system was discarded. It pushed aside all the rituals and sacrifices and brought in a lot of work for humanity. That is social service. Language and literature, it also contributed to literature. There were many books written in local languages, especially Prakrit. And there were outstanding contributions in the field of literature, art and architecture. When we look at temples, monasteries, Apart from that, a number of dharamshalas, charitable institutions were also set up. The Dilwara temple at Mount Abu, the Jain tower at Chittor are famous for the Jain architecture. And I'm sure many of you have visited Palitana in Gujarat, which has more than 800 temples. So this was a huge impact that Jainism left on the society. And the final thing is, what was the reason for the decline or the downfall of Jainism? Now, just as we looked at IVC, here when I am using the word decline, it doesn't mean that the religion totally vanished. There was a slight drop in the popularity of religion at that point in time. So what were the reasons? Jainism taught strict, rigid austerity, lot of strictness, and it prevented many people from joining it because it was difficult for them to follow the absolute rigid strictness. It did not spread to foreign countries. It did not have any missionary effort to take it out of India. Comparatively, in contrast, Buddhism started getting more and more patronage from the kings at that point in time. And Hinduism once again started becoming very, very popular, especially during the Gupta period. And that is why Jainism later remained restricted to a few pockets in the country, and there was a slight drop in the overall popularity. So this is all that we need to look at under Jainism. Let us proceed to Buddhism. Lord Buddha was born in Lumbini near Kapilvastu in Nepal. His father's name was Suddhodhan and his mother's name was Maya. Now let us look at the different names by which Lord Buddha was known by. So he was called as Siddharth Gautam at the time of his birth. Later on he was called as Buddha or the Enlightened One. Now, at the age of 35, when he attained enlightenment at Bodh Gaya in Bihar, that is when he got this beautiful name, Buddha or the Enlightened One. And when he started spreading his religious ideas after enlightenment, he was known as Tathgat or the founder of truth. When Prince Siddharth Gautam was born, King Suddhodana was told that either he will become a very renowned, a very famous king, or he will leave everything and turn into a saint, a monk. Now when King Suddhodana heard this, he was very, very upset, very worried, and tried to keep Prince Siddharth Gautam away from any kind of pain, misery, suffering, any tiny thing that would turn him and move his heart, his mind towards becoming a saint. But it so happened that Prince Siddharth Gautam one day left his palace, and on his way he saw four things that changed his entire life. It is kind of, we can say, a turning point in the life of the prince that turned him into becoming the Lord, the Buddha. So the first thing that he saw was an old man, and he realized that youth is not always going to remain. People who are going to be young are going to enter into old age. And he was quite surprised when he saw that old man, because as I told you, he was kept away from the realities of life. Later on, he saw an old man crying, groaning, mourning in pain. And he realized that life is filled with a lot of trouble, a lot of sufferings. And he realized that the life is not just a bed of roses, it also has thorns. Further, he saw the body of a dead man being carried, and he realized that the life is not going to stay forever. The person who is born is going to die. Nobody is immortal. And then finally he saw a saint who was sitting peacefully. He had a very blissful look on his face. He had no riches, he had no materialistic things with him, yet he looked very, very satisfied, very, very calm, very happy. And that is what made Prince Siddharth leave everything and go in search of truth. And that is when he later attained enlightenment, and he gave his first sermon after enlightenment in the Deer Park in Sarnath. Now this event is very important. It was known as the Dharma Chakra Pravartana, or turning of the wheel of the sacred law. So these names are important. The four great sides, the great renunciation, was called as Mahabhrishkramana, and the first sermon that he gave, that event, is known as Dharma Chakra Pravartana. Let us look at some important teachings of Lord Buddha. So the first important thing that he taught was about the Four Noble Truths, where he said the world is full of suffering. Suffering has a cause. Desire is the cause of suffering. If desire is stopped, suffering is stopped. Now you will have to remember the Four Noble Truths in this order. You can't change the order. Let us try and remember this through a simple example. How many of you feel unhappy, are very irritated that you have a phone, you want to upgrade it, but your parents are just not listening to you? Oh, so irritating, yeah? So your world is full of suffering. Now that suffering has a cause, and what is the cause of that suffering in your life? You have the desire to have an upgraded model, you want to have a better upgraded phone. Now, easier said than done, but anyway, if that desire is stopped and you are satisfied, at least I have a mobile phone, some people don't even have that. If desire is stopped, then and you are satisfied with whatever you have in life, then your suffering will also stop. So this is the beautiful thing that Lord Buddha shared, the Four Noble Truths. I would like to share a small story shared by one of my ex-students, Bhavish, highlighting the Four Noble Truths. It's a very small story. There was a very rich man who went outside the house of a saint, and he started yelling and screaming, and he said, "Come out, you saint, come out right now. I'm angry, I'm irritated." The saint came out with a smile on his face. Looking at that man got more irritated, and he said, "I am angry out here. I want to talk with you. I want an answer." He said, "Relax, tell me, what do you want?" So that rich man yelled and he said, "I want happiness." So the saint smiled and said, "Yeah, you can have all the happiness that you want in the world." That fellow once again, that rich fellow once again yelled, "Can't you hear me? I want happiness." So the saint smiled and said, "It's very easy, my son. Remove the I, remove the ahankar, remove the ego, remove the want, that is the greed. I want this, I want that. Be satisfied with whatever you have in life. And if you remove the I, if you remove the want, what will remain is utmost happiness." So through this story, I hope that I can reach out to you all and make you realize that you may not have everything that you want in the world, but try to be happy with whatever you have in hand. The next most important teaching of Lord Buddha, his contribution to the society, was the eightfold path, or the Ashtangika Marga, the middle path. Lord Buddha felt that life is like an instrument, a musical instrument. If you tighten the strings too much, it's going to break. If you leave the strings too loose, the instrument will sound horrible. That is why the strings have to be adjusted in a way where it is not on extremes. That is how he said that we must follow the middle path, not go to extreme austerities, extreme strictness, but follow a middle path to lead and attain moksha or salvation. So what are the 8 things? You can change the order, no issue at all. So you have right action, right thoughts, right belief, right living, right speech, effort, right recollection, right meditation. Now I want you to have a look at the doodling done by my students Meghavi and Manan to give us an overview of the 8th-fold path. Now I want you to help me out with this small activity. In order to first remember the 8 things under the 8th-fold path, I want to do a small activity. After we look at the 8 titles, we will see what is there in each of the main 8th-fold path. Okay? So I want you all to close your eyes. Yeah? And I just want you to meditate. It is just a small 30 seconds activity, not more. I want you to recollect only good things, have pure thoughts. I want you to have a small smile on your face. Continue staying happy, have those happy memories. Now slowly open your eyes. Now when you are happy, automatically your speech is going to be nice. You are not going to hurt anybody. Your actions will be pure. Now I want you to get up from wherever you are sitting, and I want you to just try and reach out and give an imaginary high five to somebody. Okay? So just get up from your chair please, or wherever you are seated, and just reach high up and try to give a high five. Yeah, and I don't want you to cheat when you are doing that. Alright, now if we look at the sequencing, the 8th-fold path is done. How? First one, I asked you to close your eyes, meditate. Alright, then I asked you to recollect, so right recollection. Then what kind of thoughts did I ask you to have? Positive thoughts. Then I told you when you are happy, your speech will be good. Your actions will be nice. So right speech, right action. So let's look at the first 5. Right meditation, right recollection, right thoughts, right speech, and right actions. After that, I asked you to stand up and give a high five. Okay? An imaginary high five. You believed in what I said. You took efforts. I mean, most of you got up and tried to do it. Okay, so you believed and therefore you tried to reach out, you took and you put in efforts. And finally I asked you not to cheat. That is right livelihood. Yeah, so whatever you do, it could be the smallest task, but there should be no amount of cheating. Alright, now let us look at the doodling once again to see what all is contained in that. So when we are saying right meditation means what? Concentrate on what is good, what is right. Right recollection is think about happy things, religious things, pure things. Right thoughts, remain away from empty rituals, worldly evils. Have right thoughts of helping out people. Think positive. Right speech, always speak the truth. Do not think ill of others. Do not hurt people with your speech. Right actions, not to hit, not to use any kind of violence, not to steal. Stay away from all this. Stay away from luxuries. Right belief is give up any kind of desire. Right effort is work towards removing the sins, work towards the welfare of others. And finally, right livelihood. There is no need to be dishonest while dealing with others. So it could be the smallest transaction in life, but always be honest. So these are the 8 things that he said, the way to nirvana, the 8th-fold path or the Ashtangika Marga. What were the other teachings of Lord Buddha? One is attitude towards God. So the first thing that he said is that the whole universe, he believed, was controlled by dharma, universal law, he was silent about the existence of God. He never formally denied it, but neither did he come out and talk about it. And like Lord Mahavir, he also emphasized a lot on non-violence. Next is the important teaching of code of conduct. Just like in Jainism we saw the 5 vows, Lord Buddha made a code of conduct for his followers. Not to tell a lie, similar to Satya. Yeah, we'll keep comparing it. Not to own property, that is aparigraha under Jainism. What did he say next? Not to consume alcoholic drinks. This is something different from Jainism. Next, not to commit violence. Under Jainism, we have ahimsa. And finally, not to indulge in any kind of corrupt practices like stealing. If we see Jainism, that is asteya. So he set a code of conduct for his followers. He also spoke about karma, and he taught about the theory of karma, and he said that man is the maker of his own destiny, and he believed in birth and rebirth. And he said, if you perform bad deeds, if you keep doing negativity in life, you will be punished. Therefore, one should follow the Ashtangika Marga, the eightfold path, and do good karma, because that will decide the existence in the next life. So he said that's the wheel of the existence. He also stressed on morality, said good actions should be performed. He stressed on ahimsa, and he, like Lord Mahavir, he also attached a lot of importance to life, and he said that it could be the tiniest of tiny living creature. You have to be non-violent. He also taught about universal brotherhood and spoke of equality. He said that every person is equal. He pushed aside all the differences, invited people from all the classes to join Buddhism. So just like Jainism spoke of equality, here it's titled as universal brotherhood. He also taught the people not to have faith in the yajnas and sacrifices, and he said those are all empty rituals, empty ceremonies. Yajnas and sacrifices cannot change a man's destiny. You have to do good karma, good action in order to attain moksha or salvation. And finally he spoke and taught about nirvana, and he said nirvana is the ultimate aim, ultimate goal of life. So only when we are in the peaceful state of mind, when we conquer all diseases, when we are free from desires, when we are free from the materialistic wants, will we be free from the cycle of birth and death. It's time for some brainstorming. Let us once again pause and look at the reasons why Buddhism became very popular. What were the causes for the spread of Buddhism? Now these points are already covered up, but we just are revising. So it was in the local dialect of the people. So Buddha taught people in Pali, the language of the people, so people could connect with religion. They were happy. There was a lot of royal patronage received from the kings. The kings were readily supporting Buddhism and giving a lot of money. Then there were monks who spread the ideas of Buddhism. There were monasteries. They went far and wide. They went out of India also to speak about Buddhism. And the final important thing was it attracted the people because the ideas were simple. It spoke of walking on the middle path. It was very simple, spiritual, no animal sacrifices, no class, caste distinctions, universal brotherhood, and it spoke of equality. We look at the next application-based element, that is, what was the impact of Buddhism? So Buddhism made a very, very long impact, an everlasting impact on Indian culture, art, religion, socio-cultural, political life. The most important impact was the contribution of ahimsa, where the doctrine of ahimsa became an important weapon against any kind of evils in the society. It had a great impact on the religious life, where It put a challenge to Hinduism. It pushed aside the yajnas, the sacrifices, the rigidity of the caste system. And there were various reforms that were brought in within Hinduism because of the indirect thrust impact of Buddhism. It also influenced the social life where the weaker sections got respect in society, there was equality, they got an opportunity to participate, share their thoughts, ideas. Cultural impact, Buddhism spread far and wide, even in especially Southeast Asia, China, Sri Lanka. So there was a lot of cultural exchange that took place. Language and literature were, a lot of literature was produced in languages of the masses. That is Pali. The Tripitakas or the Tripitikas, the Jataks or the Jatakas are the most important literary works of Buddhism. Finally, we look at the impact of Buddhism on art and architecture. You have the stupas, the chaityas, the viharas, rock-cut temples, which are indeed extremely, extremely unique. We come to the last element, and that is, what were the reasons for the decline of Buddhism? Once again, when I use the word decline, a sharp drop in the popularity of Buddhism as a religion, a religious ideology at that point in time. So the first thing is, there was a split in Buddhism. There were two divisions that came in, Hinayana, Mahayana. Each group brought in changes. There were differences. So there were fights within the two groups, and there were differences of ideas, opinions, and finally it was broken down into 16 smaller groups with different identities. Alright, next one is language. After Lord Buddha, once again the monks started preaching in Sanskrit, the language that only a few could understand. There was a lot of corruption in the Sangha. Now what is the Sangha? It is an organization for teaching Buddhism. So there was a lot of corruption in the Sangha. The monks started leading a luxurious life. Patronage that was received was used for personal benefit. They started leading a worldly life. And people started losing faith in the monks and their ideology. There were a lot of reforms that took place in Hinduism. Obviously, what started happening is that people turned back to Hinduism. There were a lot of invasions that took place, and the monasteries which were filled with wealth were looted. And some of the monks were very scared and they ran to the neighboring countries like Nepal, Tibet. And the final reason was end of royal patronage. Now you will realize that I use this for reasons that led to the birth, reasons that led to the decline. Now comparatively, the patronage that the kings gave dropped down. So especially the Rajput rulers who were warlike could not follow the policy of absolute ahimsa. Yeah, if you have to be a political leader and you have to carry out expansion of your territory, you cannot have the policy of ahimsa always being used. There were a number of Gupta kings especially who patronized the Hindu gods, goddesses, and a lot of importance was given to Hinduism later. And because of all these different reasons, it kind of pushed Buddhism onto a small decline. We come to the last element, and that is the similarities and differences between Jainism and Buddhism. I wanted to do this activity Venn diagram. Now you have already doodled the causes that led to the rise of Jainism, Buddhism. Turn the page, and I want you to just copy this Venn diagram. It will take you 5 minutes, not more. Now if you see, the things placed in the center are all the similarities, and you have the differences. Now you have already heard the elements, so it will not take you time to make the Venn diagram. So in this entire chapter, only two things are to be documented, And we are done with this chapter. Hope to meet you soon. Bye.